All right, let's dive into a really fascinating strategy from the recent economic survey. It tackles a classic government puzzle. How do you get your finances in order while at the same time spending big on the future? It seems impossible, right? Well, let's unpack it.
So this question really gets to the heart of it. It sounds like a complete paradox. How on earth can a government slash its deficit, the amount it overspends every year, but at the same time pump even more money into building stuff like roads and bridges? Let's see how they're trying to pull it off.
To really get the picture, we've got to rewind to FY21. Right after the pandemic hit, the fiscal deficit just exploded, hitting a massive 9.2% of GDP. That was the starting line, a huge financial hole that needed a very clear, very smart plan to fix. And here's the finish line. The government has set a target, what it calls a glide path, to bring that deficit all the way down to 4.4% of GDP by FY26. That is a huge cut. So the billion-dollar question is, how do you make a cut that deep without totally slamming the brakes on the economy? So what we're looking at here is a massive fiscal balancing act, like a high-wire act. On one side, you have this urgent need to get the nation's finances back on solid ground. But on the other, you absolutely have to keep investing in things that create long-term growth.
And this isn't just our interpretation. The economic survey says it loud and clear. The government is not picking one of these goals over the other. It's aiming to do both at the exact same time, which, is a pretty big shift from the old playbook of just cutting everything.
And yeah, they've basically written a whole new fiscal playbook for this. It goes way beyond simple belt-tightening. Instead, it focuses on something much, much smarter: the quality of the spending itself.
This is the key phrase you need to know: credible consolidation. Now, the important thing here is that this isn't about just taking an axe to the budget, not at all. It's about being really strategic. It's about trimming the fat in some areas so you can free up cash to spend more on high-impact investments that will actually grow the economy later on.
And you can see that shift in thinking right here. The old way was often just expenditure compression, basically cutting spending wherever you could. The new strategy, though, is quality reorientation. It's asking a much better question: where is our money going to have the biggest bang for its buck?
And hey, the numbers don't lie. You can see it right here in the data. Revenue expenditure, that's kind of like the daily running costs, think salaries, subsidies, that kind of thing. That's been brought under control, and that created the room for CapEx expenditure, or CAPEX, to boom. CAPEX is the exciting stuff, investment in long-term assets like power plants and highways. And look at that, it has tripled in just 5 years. That's the strategy in action.
Okay, wait a minute. This brings us back to that central puzzle. Even if you're shifting money around, how do you fund a massive increase in investment while you're also trying to lower your total deficit? It feels like the math just doesn't add up. Where is all this extra cash coming from?
Well, the secret sauce, the linchpin of this entire strategy, is unlocking value from assets the government already owns. And that brings us to asset and equity monetization. Simply put, it's a way to raise a bunch of cash without taking on a single rupee of new debt.
So what does that actually mean? Well, think of it like this. The government is selling a small piece of a company it owns, or finding other ways to generate income from its assets. The key takeaway is that this brings in what are called non-debt capital receipts. That's just a fancy term for saying the government is raising money by selling something it has, not by borrowing more. It's turning an asset into cold, hard cash.
And this isn't just a theory, by the way. It's happening right now, and it's working. This data from FY26 shows that some serious capital has been raised. You see the offer for sale, or OFS? That's a pretty straightforward share sale. But look at that huge number next to invite-based monetization. Invites are these really clever tools that let investors buy into a bundle of infrastructure assets, like a portfolio of highways, and they've been a massive success.
Okay, so that's what's happening now. But what if they could supercharge this whole strategy? The economic survey floats a really big idea that could unlock even more value. And it all comes down to one magic number: 26%.
See, at the moment, the rules are pretty strict. Under the Companies Act, for a company to be called a government company, the government has to own at least 51% of it. This basically puts a ceiling on how much of its stake the government can sell before the company loses that special status.
So, here's the game-changing proposal. Change that definition, at least for companies listed on the stock market. Now, why 26%? Because in the world of corporate law, owning 26% gives you special resolution rights. That's basically a veto power over any major strategic decisions. So the government could sell off a ton more equity and raise way more cash while still keeping a powerful hand on the tiller.
So, what's the big payoff if they do this? Well, there are a few huge wins. First, you'd unlock vast sums of money that are just sitting there, tied up in government equity. Second, the government still gets to keep strategic control with that veto power. Third, it creates a predictable pipeline of funding for years and years. And finally, by bringing in more private investors, you're opening the door for these companies to become more agile and professionally managed.
And this is where it all comes together, the big finale. What happens to all this money that's been unlocked? Well, it's not just used to fill holes in the budget. It gets recycled back into the economy, creating what you could call a virtuous cycle of growth.
It's a really beautiful, self-reinforcing loop. You start by monetizing an older asset, which brings in that non-debt cash. That money is then channeled directly into new, high-growth capital projects. That new spending boosts the whole economy, which in turn makes the country stronger and more resilient for the future.
And we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here. This is real-world stuff. The cash raised from selling a slice of an old company is literally transformed into the building blocks of tomorrow's economy. We're talking modern ports, brand new highways, and the digital backbone of the country.
And when you zoom out, this is the ultimate goal. The whole point of this careful financial management is to build a more stable, more resilient economy, one that can handle whatever the world throws at it, attract more investment, and ultimately secure a stronger economic future for everyone.
So you have to ask yourself a final, powerful question. This whole strategy of credible consolidation, fueled by asset monetization, is a pretty unique answer to a problem that governments all over the world are grappling with. By literally turning old assets into new infrastructure, is India actually writing a new playbook for how nations can achieve both fiscal discipline and economic growth? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.